Start Over Strong, Life After a DUI, a podcast for people, not offenders. Brought to you by Smart Start, the nation's most trusted, judgment-free ignition interlock provider.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is Stigma Free IID. I am Morgan Ryan, your host, and boy, do I have an episode planned for you today. What an honor it is to include a guest for the second time on this show. We're going to talk to her in just a moment. On this show, we talk a lot about ignition interlock devices, DUIs, DWIs, prevention, and accountability. Today, we're going to get very personal. This episode is both about the dark and the light and how my generation is changing the name and the game in all things drunk driving accountability. With us today, I would like to welcome the Senior Director of Development for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, MADD, and Miss Meghan Carter. Welcome to the show, Meghan.
Thank you, Morgan, for having me again.
Yes, ma'am. And Meghan, you and I we're friends.
Yes.
Outside of work.
Yes.
Yes. And so we are two very driven individuals who I would consider high performing and exceptionally captivated by what we do. We love what we do. Would you say that's true, Meghan?
I would say that's 100% correct.
Yes, great.
Yep.
So I want you to tell our audience a little bit more about you in terms of, yes, your resume and just high level, maybe where your passion comes from for this subject. And then we're going to get into it. And we're going to talk a little bit more about why people listen, Meghan, when you speak. So
Sure.
First and foremost, give us your background.
Yeah, so I've actually been with Mothers Against Drunk Driving it'll be coming up on 18 years in August.
18
years.
You don't look old
Started
enough.
when I was 10 years old. So, just give me that. But with that being said, I started as an affiliate executive director out of St. Louis, Missouri, which is my home, and have worked in various roles throughout the organization to not only grow our mission work, but to grow capacity, grow revenue, and just to overall our work that we do to end drunk and drugged driving. So have been, like I said, with the organization for nearly 18 years. For me, it is personal. For many of the individuals involved with the organization, it is personal. I don't speak of it very often, but July of 2002, my twin brother, Jonathan, was killed in an underage substance use crash. And so I had been introduced to the organization previously with the work that we do in schools and having school assemblies, but never did I ever think that I would be in the position, or my family would be in the position, that we would be engaged in the organization that we have. So with that, I was in college at the time, graduated, and I was working actually at a private golf club in the St. Louis area doing the events for the members. And a former national board member at the time, who I was very familiar with and was a very big support and advocate for my family in the St. Louis area. He happened to be there. I saw him, we chatted for a bit, and he said that he just sat back that day and watched me essentially work the room and do my job. And he said later on, I just sat there and was like, I need to hire that young lady. So fortunately, there was a position opened up in the St. Louis area, and he encouraged me to apply. We talked a bit more about what that would look like, and the rest is history. I've been there since.
That's wonderful. I want to know more about the story, and to have lost a sibling and a twin at that is incredibly heartbreaking. Any fatality situation is heartbreaking. It's something that I say often on the show. When it comes to Mothers Against Drunk Driving and your opportunities there and the organization as a whole, I want to focus as well today on the brand, where the brand is heading, the programs that you have, and why you're such a perfect fit for this role. I believe you have been ordained for this position, and it's why when you speak, people listen. What's more captivating to me is that you do not share your story very often, and you wear it in a very humble way. And I think that's how you've made an even bigger impact. Your story for me has been something that I can never begin to understand. But what I do understand and what I relate to so personally is angels in your life, like this gentleman, who come along and they notice and they decide that they're going to give you an opportunity, but really it's you who is making the decision to make an impact. And I think that's the difference in the historical perspectives and perceptions of companies like Smart Start or companies like yours. We exist at Smart Start to provide a program to those that are going through post-DUI. We have ignition interlock devices. We have portable alcohol monitoring devices. We have wearable devices, anything that covers the gamut. But I, like you, and am someone who, up until today, I've never personally shared the details of my story either. I have mentioned it. I have talked about it. I do have an episode called Morgan's Story, where from a very high level, I talk about being what is called a Chapter 8 spouse. That's a reference to a large program here for alcoholics. And I'm not someone who is an alcoholic. I'm not someone who has a DUI, but the judgment and stigma that I myself and my two very innocent small children have faced because of my story is something that I've touched base on. But today I'll get in the weeds a little bit more. And I think what's beautiful are the opportunities we have.
Yes.
We're using that pain on purpose. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And, for me, obviously it's very personal, but, in an instance where I'm able to share, I will. It's just, even, coming up on 24 years since the crash happened, it brings a lot of pain. And you feel that void every moment that you talk about it. And, for my family, Jonathan, we talk about him all the time. We talk about, the mischief that he would get into. We talk about, the funny things that we did as kids and everything like that. So it's not like he's not talked about amongst us. It's just, sharing it in such a personable way to an audience. We have victims and survivors throughout the country that share their journeys every single day. And the strength that they have to be able to share that, knowing that they're making a difference and they're making an impact, forever have the utmost respect for them and just look at them as true heroes for the cause. And I think oftentimes too, I'm a sibling, I'm a sister, a twin sister at that, that's twin brother was killed. Oftentimes there's this thought that, Mothers Against Drunk Driving is a group of angry mothers who are out to rid the world of alcohol and, prohibitionists. But in reality, we're men, women, and youth of all ages. We're moms, we're dads, we're siblings, aunts, uncles, friends, colleagues that are just have been impacted or have seen the impact of impaired driving, that are just wanting to make a difference and ensure that no other family has to experience the pain from the loss that comes of impaired driving, because as we say, it is 100% preventable 100% of the time. We know that it's a choice that somebody makes, and we just want to make sure that, if we can save one life, we're going to continue to share those stories.
Yes, and that's why we're here, Meghan, is to make an impact and to really, truly affect impaired driving as much as we can. We're using our pain on purpose, and having known you personally on a personal level, all the things that make you phenomenal and exceptional, I think about all the moms and the dads and, you as a sibling. Jonathan, you still very much talk about him as if he's a person in the room.
Yes.
You miss him every day.
Every single day. It has, his crash and all that has come from it has left a massive void in our family. I'm one of 7 children. Yes, good Catholic family. So, but with that being said, it's just, it has left a massive void in our family. And, it's every single day, every single celebration, we've had, many of my siblings have had children since. And, I think that's one of the hardest things, especially for my 3 children, Cole, Liam, and Audrey, is, again, keeping him at the forefront. We talk about him often. We talk about the crash. We talk about, again, the person that he was. And, it breaks my heart every single time, just knowing that, I can talk about him at day's end and just, explain, but, what they've missed out on as well.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're speaking from a place of honoring his memory.
Absolutely.
Meghan, do you think that you feel the impact of his death differently as his twin?
There have been several conversations about that. And I think, For me, I never want to make it a comparison, especially for my other siblings, because we all had our own individual connection, obviously with Jonathan and a relationship. But, one thing that always stood out to me is I remember growing up, a lot of times people would ask, oh, do you like being a twin? And I'm like, I don't know anything different. Like this is what I was, we were born to. But I will say, for somebody who you always had kind of that partner in crime, you always had somebody. So, going to school, even if we would be in separate classrooms, we still hung out with the same group of friends. And, every milestone was always celebrated with somebody else, which was never a bad thing. It was the reality of being a twin. So, I remember having that asked of me as I was growing up. And then after the crash and shortly after, I remember that first birthday being extremely hard. Not only because obviously he wasn't there, but it was just like, it was a moment of uncomfortableness. And it still is a little bit of that, where it's like even celebrating with, the family, and we still do the birthday cakes, sing happy birthday and all that. There still is this level of discomfort for me personally, where it's just like, I don't know if I really like all this attention just on me right now, knowing that I always had somebody else. So even after, again, nearly 24 years, it still has a level of discomfort with it. But again, it's unfortunately the circumstances and what has happened to my family. And like I said, that's why, I, along with all of us and everybody who's involved with the organization, work so hard to prevent these senseless tragedies.
Yes, ma'am. And I think that's what's interesting is you and I organizationally and in theory are not supposed to historically get along. You come from a position of, an organization that, as you described, a group of angry women that are out to demonize offenders. I come from a company who stands and is a public voice on behalf of offenders. Me personally, someone who has a very, in very different ways, a tragic story, from the position of supporting almost and trying to help offenders. And yet here we are today as really good friends, right? Yes. Making our mark because we have felt it maybe differently. I know there's fatalities in your C-suite and this is why you exist, and the same for me. In fact, Phaedra Creed, she's an individual that works for us.
Amazing.
Incredible woman.
Yes.
Has her own podcast, and she, is a paraplegic as a result of a drunk driving crash when she was 22. When you look around our company, we also had heads all over the place that are impacted by drunk driving. But you and I have decided to use our pain on purpose, and we are doing it differently. We're having the difficult conversations, including sharing our own testimonies. You speak very eloquently in mind, body, and spirit, and yes, corporately, from a place of forgiveness. For me, that's incredibly important. It's part of what I do. Those are the conversations I have every day. My personal story, I had touched base on it, but my ex-husband is diagnosed severe coping alcoholic. And I spent nearly half my life, what feels like, trying to save him and save our family. When I met him, he was not necessarily an alcoholic, I think. I'm not an expert, but we were in our 20s, and you would assume that the behavior back then was normal. It's what you did, which is another conversation. How our Gen Z, especially females, are now binge drinking more than males, how they treat alcohol, and how these alcohol companies can groom individuals of that age early on to become addicts later in life, especially single moms. And so back then it wasn't a problem. And I watched and witnessed essentially this poison completely take away my person. And so when you're given a testimony that you don't want, you have a choice. And my choice has been to stand as proudly as I can and choose prevention. from a place of forgiveness, both for him and for, those on the other side of it. Our executive team has said very often that we have a heart for fatalities, but we have a heart for offenders at the same time. And, I'm someone I'm not an alcoholic. I don't struggle with addiction. Half of my following are addicts. They're going through sobriety. They're going through calibration. I talk a lot on Instagram about daily discipline and accountability. And if you're going through a hard season, how to get through that with motivation and joy and to choose happiness every day. If that's the gym or, reading or going to church or finding a community. Especially those who may be caught off guard by a DUI. We have a growing number of single moms who don't ever get a break. They go out to brunch. It's 2 to 4 in the afternoon on a Sunday, and they're ending up with a DUI. And so these individuals, that's the audience I'm speaking to. I say very proudly that I am a Jesus girl, and whoever your creator is, whoever you believe to be your reigning power, I always encourage people to believe in something. I choose to believe in Jesus. And I believe for me, that's a big part of recovery, even movement in general, right? I talked about the gym being a form of reform. But as someone who is healthy, so to speak, I don't have an addiction problem. I've never had a DUI. I am as loud as I can be on behalf of offenders. I believe that Jesus sat with sinners, and no sin is greater than another sin. We all make mistakes, and you are not defined by that mistake. When we come to the table and we have the hard conversations and we bring those to light, and we don't shun them or push them under the table or demonize, so to speak, that's when we make change. That's when we make an impact. When we get together and we say, I see you over there, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. I see you, Meghan. I want to work together. In the past, Meghan, your organization, you said it yourself, is known for almost demonizing offenders. Talk to me about what you guys are doing today and if that's changed.
So we, as you're talking, I immediately think of our program, our Victim Impact Panel program, which is, we're very thankful for Smart Start, obviously being a new partner with that program and the work that we do. But it's a court-ordered program where individuals who've been convicted and sentenced to a DWI, DUI, OUI, depending on where you're located in the United States, they are required to attend a panel where individuals who are victims and survivors share their personal journeys. Sometimes there's law enforcement officials that speak to the arrest that was made and provide a level of education when it comes to the field sobriety test, as well as give their own testimony. They're the ones making the dreaded knock on the doors, notifying families that their loved ones are no longer coming home through the death notifications that they do. In addition, we also have individuals themselves who've been convicted of impaired driving who also speak and share their personal journey. And this program is all in the hopes that hearing somebody's story that day, hearing a piece of it will forever stay with them, that they will recognize what could have happened from point A to point B before the officer pulled him over that evening. Or at that point too, they'll also make the decision moving forward to never get behind the wheel impaired again and never ride with an impaired driver either. That's the ultimate goal and the hope. But oftentimes we've talked, individuals that come are prepared that, again, we're going to be that group of angry mothers who are going to finger point and talk about, why their specifics are there. And it's not that at all. Our point is to be welcoming and to be, have them come in with the idea that we're here to just share. We're here to tell our again, taking our pain into purpose, turning our tragedy into triumph, and sharing it in a way that is going to make an impact and overall, again, have the individuals that are in attendance no longer make that choice again. And one thing that we are highly focused on as an organization as of late, we've always said that, and we will always be a victim services organization where we are there to provide direct support to the victims and survivors of impaired driving from the moment they need us up until the point that they say, thank you so much for everything, which could be, immediately following the criminal justice process, which we provide support with, up until years down the road, they're still looking for that support. But one thing that we've really talked about is on the other side of things, for those who have been arrested and convicted, we do recognize that some individuals might need a little more help, that there might be, to your point, alcoholism or alcohol abuse. So we're really starting as an organization to focus on that prevention side a bit more, have that be our main focus as the organization. And while we will forever be reactive and be a direct support to the victims and survivors, let's look at the proactive side of really preventing these crashes from happening and really talking about, okay, what do we need to do? What does that awareness look like? That not only is for those over the age of 21, but then also talking to our youth and talking to teens when it's specifically talking about the dangers of underage substance use. So
this is full circle prevention to me. And to be honest, when I think about MAD, I think about Smokey the Bear. I think about, prevent forest fires and, what you can do to essentially prevent. But we were told, don't drink and drive, right? But what you're describing is so much more. And I want people to realize that what MAD is doing is so much more than that. You've talked about prevention. We had a great conversation yesterday. I hope everybody watches and listens to that episode. It is fascinating about promposal, the prom promise. This is your HOCO, this is your spring break, your graduation, how to talk to your children, not making the assumption, not my kid, right? Such an amazing toolkit came out of that conversation yesterday. Yes. But MAD today, you guys are doing prevention, you're in education, victim support, victim impact panels for those that have gotten a DUI. And that to me, that's my favorite part about it, because it's almost like, we hear the reference again, I'm a Jesus girl, Jesus goes in and flips tables. This generation, your generation is going in and flipping tables, so to speak. You're flipping the script.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, we're going to go stigma free.
So, oftentimes when we're out in the community and we talk to individuals, we'll start the presentation, if you will, by saying, how many of you have heard of MAD or Mothers Against Drunk Driving? And the vast majority of individuals put their hands up and they're like, okay, yes. And then the next follow-up question is, how many of you know what we do? And those hands slowly but surely trying to trickle down, because it's like, well, we know what your overall work is to do, but we don't know what we do, what you do. So any opportunity to provide that level of education to say, hey, this is what we're doing in the community, this is all the work that we're doing, oftentimes individuals are surprised. So I'll go through the little nuggets of those. As mentioned, we provide direct support through our victim services program, providing emotional support, as well as connecting victims and survivors of impaired driving crashes with others who've experienced the same sort of pain and that same trauma, to be able to connect with one another.
That's ground zero work to me. So you're there at ground zero. Okay, continue. Yep. What else are you doing?
One of the biggest pieces that we do with victims and survivors as well is, there's the crash, and then oftentimes there is the criminal justice process that comes afterwards. Unless they've worked in the system before or have had any sort of interaction with it, they're often going in not knowing what to expect. And it's also a very intimidating process, to say the least. So we guide them through that. We work with the prosecutors. We work with the court-appointed victim advocates to provide support, to provide a level of education, letting them know what their rights are as victims, helping them write their victim impact statements. And I think one of the most important things is just being, when requested, in court with them, to be a hand to hold, to just say, we're here, we're support for you if you need anything, because oftentimes they're just within feet of the individuals who either took their loved one's life or have injured their loved ones. So we've recognized the trauma and the pain that comes from that. So, that's one of the biggest pieces that we do. And again, as mentioned before, we are there from that very first phone call that they make, or very first interaction, up until the point that they no longer need our support. So that's one of the biggest pieces of our organization on the, again, proactive side, with providing direct support to the victims and survivors. In addition, we're in the schools. I think that's where most people recognize the work that we do, where we're in the schools educating our youth on the dangers of underage substance use. We know that ending drunk driving starts with preventing underage drinking, and we're hyper-focused on being in the schools, getting in front of our youth, teaming up with the youth, and getting the community overall involved with the work that we do, because we want to raise the next generation that says, we're not driving impaired. this is going to be a thing of the past. So they are our future, and they're really a key focus for us. In addition, as mentioned, we do our programs where they are court ordered, our victim impact panel programs. So those are put on throughout the country. We not only do those in person, but then we also have it available online, knowing that, many years ago, there was this thing called COVID that came along that changed the way that we do a lot of our programs and services, not only with MAD, but many businesses and many entities. So we have them online as well for individuals to take.
I did want to mention for those that are listening, going through a DUI, if this is new to you, when we're talking about victim impact panels, that's part of the journey. Okay. So Smart Start essentially is one of the first conversations you had. If you've had a DUI, you're going to get that ignition interlock device installed on your vehicle, and then you're going to go through the program. That's your stipulation. If it's 6 months or 10 months or 12 months or several years based on the situation, aggravated factors with your DUI. And part of the journey is to attend a victim impact panel. And so MAD is then situated throughout that high level journey in that victim impact panel. And we are actually partnered with MAD now, if I understand it, to help facilitate. Smart Start is very much almost a best friend, a concierge, if you will, that's guiding you through that program after a DUI. And so while you're walking through this process with Smart Start, you will then essentially walk through that victim impact panel with MAD, which is one of the programs that you just mentioned. Thank you. Wanted to clarify for listeners and viewers
that's perfect.
today.
That's perfect. So, and then in addition, one of our biggest partners is also law enforcement. They're the ones on the front lines that are working to eliminate impaired driving, removing impaired drivers from our roadways. So we do a lot with them. One of the biggest ways is through our law enforcement recognition events, where we have afternoons or evenings where we bring them together and we say thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for putting your life on the line and, walking away from your family to do a job that many would choose not to do, but they have decided that they would, and they're taking the time to, again, do all that they can to keep our community safe. So we thank them for that. And, and also, they do a lot of work with high visibility enforcement, whether it's through saturation patrols or sobriety checkpoints, and, any moment that we can to partner with them to bring those to light in the community. Because, when we say high visibility, we mean high visibility. It means the community knows that they're going to be out there. The community knows that there's going to be, depending on where you are, sobriety checkpoint set up. There's going to be a saturation patrol that's set up. And, the idea of that is we're going to let you know, because we want you to make a plan before you go out. We want to let you know that law enforcement's going to be out there in full force. So make sure you have a plan, and not just that evening or the evenings that they're really hyper focused on it, but every evening moving forward. And again, we're always in our state and federal talking with lawmakers to strengthen our laws and ensure that we're working to end impaired driving. We have the HALT law that is a federal mandate that we are continuing to keep an eye on and continue to push, because we ultimately know, law enforcement does an amazing job with removing impaired drivers, but we know ultimately technology is going to be what's going to end impaired driving for good. So, we're not a group of angry mothers. We're, there's individuals who've been impacted, but there's many who just see the tragedies that come from it. And we just want to make sure that we're saving lives and doing everything that we can to, again, prevent these senseless tragedies.
Yes, ma'am. I think too, you mentioned something around law enforcement checkpoints and things like that. I do want to encourage our listeners and viewers, again, to listen to the other episode about prom, because Meghan, you gave a phenomenal description and statistics around the parents who allow their kids to drink at home. Some interesting facts there that just reminded me of, they're not driving, they're not going to hit that checkpoint, they're drinking at home. And so I want people to check out that other episode. Again, that toolkit was phenomenal. I think Meghan and Morgan need to go on tour and just continue to blow this out of the water. And so I do have some final questions for you as we close today. I want to talk a lot about advice, what my advice would be for anybody going through my lane and perspective, and then what your advice would be, and then how people can get involved. So let's start there. If I'm someone that's listening, or I'm interested, I do have a teen, or I do have a DUI, or I have lost someone, how can I get involved with MAD today?
So there's a number of ways that you can get involved. So if you you are a parent, or if you are a caring adult that has a teen or youth in your lives, you can contact our organization. And we have part of our underage substance use prevention programming is very much geared to parents. It's our Power of Parents program.
Yes.
That we are very thankful for our supporters
Which
nationwide
is
for.
it's actually very cool.
Yes.
It's a cool program. It's not maybe what one would expect from a large organization such as yours putting together this, black and white, difficult to consume program. It's very easy to digest.
I was going to say it's all about having the conversation and the importance of starting it no matter when.
Yes.
It's never too late to start the conversation about the dangers of underage substance use, but it's, encouraging parents to start it and to have it often. Continue to have that conversation, knowing that it's all, we're protecting our kiddos. We're protecting our kiddos.
It's wonderful.
Yes.
I know you guys do live donations as well on your website if anybody wants to donate regularly.
So we are a, much like others, nonprofit organization that, thanks to our corporate and foundation partners, as well as individuals who give to the organization, all of our programs, all of our services, everything that we do in the community is at no charge to the community. So we're very thankful to our partners who are able to support us, whether it's through, again, as I mentioned, Power of Parents and nationwide sponsoring that. We also have amazing partners with Anheuser-Busch, Diageo, the NFL, where Uber, where we're all working together, recognizing the support and what they're doing to help us in our mission work. But we have events throughout the country that we host that anybody can get involved in, anyone can get engaged, whether, again, it's by participating in one of our Move with MAD, our walk events throughout the country, or simply saying, hey, I have 2 hours of time every single week. What can I help you with? What is there that I can do to make a difference and to help spread the word and help get that message out there?
Yes, that's wonderful. Well, I think from an advice perspective, I think being courageous in any role where you are in your walk of life, taking a chance, so to speak, on, for us, it was a natural, immediate friendship. And then just using the power of the opportunity that we have and our voices to come together to really try and make an impact in drunk driving accountability. And you say drunk and drugged driving, which is, I think, a beautiful way to say that. For me, I think that anyone who's going through a DUI at this moment or a DWI, I truly believe in Smart Start's Ignition Interlock program. We are the Stigma Free brand. If it were myself or my ex-husband or a friend or you or someone else going through a DUI, I would personally want them to go through a company like Smart Start. We even call our sales team, so to speak, program advisors, and we celebrate when you get your device removed. We're not here to take your money or to be predatory in any way. We're here to support you through that journey. And I know it's a tough journey, especially for those that are not a subsequent offender, sometimes even worse for subsequent offenders, because they've made now, a second bad choice or a third bad choice, and so on and so forth. Our program as well is extremely cost effective, which is something I'm very proud of. We do have what's called a total package, and that's where you're going to pair your roadside assistance. For example, if it's cold or you get locked out or an emergency were to happen, you can pair that with your IID as well as your SR22. That's that insurance binder that you have to carry. If you are a high-risk driver, you can pair those together and you could save thousands of dollars. So for that, the cost, and then the technology. We have phenomenal technology, the best tech stack in the business, in my opinion, and the device is small. It's discreet. So when you're going through that moment and you're trying to get your dignity back, something that's small like a vape that you're holding in your hand that you're blowing into, sometimes in front of your children in the back seat, to me, that's the way to go. Essentially, everything about our company is stigma free. We are not here to judge you. You are not defined by this mistake, and it does not define you. Advice from Morgan for anyone going through maybe a loved one that has a problem with alcohol. Today, on the other side of my divorce, what I will share is that I am, to this day, his biggest fan. I do have 2 small children, and I say whenever I can that I am his biggest fan. I do pray regularly for him to come to a place of acceptance, and I ask him regularly to attend a local program with me, if he would be willing to come with me, that we could go together. So even though I have taken a step away and been released from that, I think every opportunity that I can in this lifetime to be his co-pilot, I will continue to play that role for him as far as my children and his life are concerned. So loving from afar is a good, safe choice. And for me, that's the right choice. Meghan, what advice do you have to give to people that may be dealing with a fatality?
So first and foremost, if you haven't reached out to MAD or haven't been connected with the organization, I highly encourage you to do so. I mean, personally, for my family, I know that we can never thank the organization and thank the individuals enough that have provided support and walked us through, what this journey was going to look like. And I often say the word journey as opposed to story, because story has a beginning and an end. There is no end to this journey. It continues on. There's no ending point that, there's not going to be this void that we have in our family with Jonathan, and that applies to everybody. So I would encourage you to reach out to Matt if you haven't already. And for those who feel compelled and feel the strength to be able to do so, we encourage you to share your journeys, because we know that they're making an impact. And we know that, even if in a room full of 100 people, if you touch one person and they make that decision to never drive impaired again, then we have made an impact. They have made an impact, and that, their loved ones were not lost, or they themselves as survivors, the crash was not 100% in vain, that it is making a difference, and that it can be a very positive piece of your healing journey.
Wow. Words from my role model herself. Positive impact. It was not 100% in vain. What a beautiful summary, Meghan, by you. And my promise to you is that I will continue to make waves with you. And our generation will help fixing the problem. We truly will. So thank you, Meghan, for being here today.
Thanks for having me again.
Thank you for joining us today. My name is Morgan Ryan, and this is Stigma Free IID. If you or a loved one find yourself in a situation with a DUI and you need an ignition interlock device, you can visit smartstartinc.com. You can also get your first 2 payments free with coupon code Stigma Free IID, or call 844-766-0156 to learn more. Thank you so much for joining.